Welcome to HITea with Grace, where we spill the tea on HIT. Today, I'm honored to welcome to the pod Julia Komissarchik. Thanks for joining me, Julia.
Thank you for having me on the podcast.
So tell me a little bit about the career path that brought you to your role today, and what is your role today?
Well, my role today is a CEO and co-founder of a company which is in healthcare IT or AI in healthcare. But my background is mathematics and computer science. I've been in math for as long as I can remember myself. I actually spent a lot of time in competitions during my high school years, middle and high school years. And then I had a degree in mathematics from UC Berkeley. That's in California, and a degree in computer science from Cornell University.
Wow. And so now what do you do at the company now?
The company started in 2017, and what we're trying to do is solve a very interesting problem that AI companies in healthcare face, as well as researchers. And actually, if we're speaking about my personal background, I've been in AI for over 20 years. I have 10 US patents in the area and more in the pipeline. But the company itself is trying to solve this problem where if we're looking at the ChatGPT, right, that everybody's discussing right now and sort of perceives as AI of the hour, it's all been trained on publicly available internet data, billions and billions of points of it. That's what made it so strong, because all models depend on what the data they were trained on. Whereas for AI in healthcare, it's much more difficult because by definition, this AI has to be trained on medical records, which are somebody's very private, very personal, very sensitive information. So without that information being de-identified, meaning it cannot lead back to the patient, this data cannot be used. And that's the problem we're trying to solve. How to make it possible for this data to be accessible at the same time protecting patients' privacy.
Very interesting. And you're so inspiring. Can't wait to learn from you today. So many FDA-approved AI models in healthcare are only implemented in a single hospital. How can expanding access to diverse clinical data help researchers create models that generalize across different populations, geographies, and care settings?
That's the idea. If you train the data on a certain sliver of population, then this particular model will be applicable only to that sliver of population. That's why it's so critical to train those models on highly diverse data. So actually, there is an interesting article on where the data for study is coming from. It's a couple of years old, but unfortunately, it's not. The situation didn't change that much. And that is, they're coming from large institutions on the coasts. Most of them is from California, but not the California at large, but, Stanfords of this world. Chalks, the Children's Hospital of Orange County, and others, large institutions on the West Coast, as well as the large institutions on the East Coast. But when it comes to rural clinics or tribal clinics, for example, I'm in Utah. We actually have quite a few tribal clinics as well as rural clinics. The data from those clinics is not used for training, and as a result, the models are not applicable to those populations. That's very scary.
So understanding that, what infrastructure or collaboration models do we need to better gather clinical data at a broader scale that's more diverse and really helps enable more meaningful research and innovation?
Well, that's where creating data lakes, so sort of centralized or decentralized data lakes comes in. That's where so-called federated learning comes in, where the data doesn't necessarily leave the places, but the model travels to where the data is. But in all those cases, the problem of de-identification and privacy still remains. You have to de-identify the data before it's used for any or all of those methodologies.
And when we're thinking about all of the different type of data that you need to use, imaging, lab results, voice notes, pathology, video, ambient, all of the above, how can sharing and integrating kind of multimodal clinical data types really advance quality and accuracy of research-driven AI?
That's very much like we humans do, right? We don't rely on just one type. We always rely on multiple types. Historically, it was just been easier to, let's say, just rely on medical notes because that was the quote-unquote readily available information. But now that we have images, and as they say, images, one picture is worth 1,000 words, now we can do a lot of interesting things with images, with recordings, for example, voice recordings for mental health or for medical images. One of my favorite examples is mammography. So mammograms is something which is done every year, but actually it not only can detect, the image itself can be a source of information to detect cancer, but it also can detect vascular disease. for the sort of two for the price of one, right? And more, because there's so much information available in those pictures that if we are able to leverage that information, we can do a lot of great things. That's where multimodality comes in.
Tell us a little bit more about what multimodality is and how that fits into the broader scheme of both care and research.
So modality means different, well, it's overloaded word, but modality means both the types of data. So for example, video, photo versus audio recording, right? But it also means different types of exams. For example, for medical images, it could be X-ray versus CT scan versus MRI versus ultrasound. All of those are also sometimes called modalities. So it's overloaded word, but one can think of it as anything and everything which is collected about human health can be leveraged. It could be Fitbit information, Apple Watch information. It could be ambient recordings. There's so many different things that can be done. But all of them together, that's where the multimodality comes from. And that can be leveraged to identify issues. The data shows that 30% of all the data that was generated by humanity is medical information. So if we're able to leverage all of this, it will, if properly used, can actually increase the coverage of those AI models that you just mentioned in the beginning, but also will create stronger models and also stronger research. It's not only about AI, right? It's about traditional research as well. But all of those together will create very interesting advancements in healthcare.
Absolutely.
Just as long as we can use it.
I know. And I'm probably thinking a lot of my listeners are thinking federated learning is a great way to train AI and distributed data sets without moving the data itself. But of course, privacy risks remain. So can we talk a little bit about protecting patient privacy and how we can design systems to really have privacy built into the system itself?
Mm-hmm. Well, for federated learning, it was an interesting advancement, right? The idea here was if we don't touch the data, first of all, we don't have to make it cumbersome to share it from one place to another. Because if, for example, you're talking about pathology data, it could be 1 terabyte per one exam. It's just a lot of data which is in those slides, right? So the idea was that it will save us from sharing data, as in moving it from place to place, but also it will save us from worrying about sharing patient information. The first hypothesis held. Unfortunately, the second one didn't. There is research which shows that if you can actually reconstruct the original image from those, what is federated learning, right? It's usually it's hub or it could be distributed. But the idea here is that rather than you and I trading images, we will trade weights. But if those weights are watched or gradients, but if those weights or gradients are watched, the image can be actually reconstructed. So I can actually see your original image, which you probably didn't intend me to do. So that's the unfortunate thing about federated learning. Data volume reasoning still holds, but not let's use the data as is. So it has to be de-identified. If that answers your question.
It does. And then also, how do we kind of keep safety as part of that process?
Thinking about it, basically, and actually that's what I would encourage everybody. It's not about healthcare professionals. We're all patients, either we or our family members, thinking about how our data is shared. For example, I was just talking to this lady. She needed an urgent question answered about an X-ray of her daughter, and she realized that she was doing the wrong thing, but she still submitted the entire image to ChatGPT. That's something that you would not want to do. Thinking through where are you sharing your data, who are you sharing it with? That's always important, and for patients, but also for healthcare organizations. Well, first of all, it's illegal to share data willy-nilly, right? There's HIPAA, GDPR, depends on the country you're in, but also there will be legal and fiscal implications, meaning they could be liable. Not jail time, but up to jail time. There could also be financial fees, but there's also reputation damage. If the hospital is known for not sharing the data properly or storing the data properly, patients will stop trusting them. And that will be a disaster for a healthcare organization, right? Because everything runs on trust.
Absolutely. And, as we kind of finalize this part of the podcast, I'm wondering, with physician shortages, burnout, there seems to be a real need for scaling AI to support research and clinical workflows simultaneously. So how can better access to de-identified data really accelerate that growth while improving care?
Well, you're absolutely right. So if we look at the overall trends, right, the population gets older. There's more of us, but the number of doctors at best stays the same or decreases, depends on the profession. We have a gap. We have to be treated, right? We need somebody to treat us. So most likely, it's not most likely. AI in healthcare is here to stay. We don't have any choice. However, if those models are not trained on data like us, then it will be applicable to us. It will make decisions based on somebody else's population. And that's very dangerous. So that's another thing which we as patients, as well as we as healthcare professionals, should think about.
If I were to give you a crystal ball and you could look into the future, what do you hope to be innovating even further 5-10 years down the road when it comes to these AI models?
Well, for us, that's the funny part. We are not necessarily in healthcare in traditional sense. We don't build models for diagnostics and triage, right? For us, it's all about protection. So, but if we're speaking about AI in healthcare in general, I think hopefully it will be even faster. But what I would love to see is for models to be very good assistants to the doctors, to be able to compensate for those gaps in coverage, and also to solve more problems than even humans can do, because sometimes AI can identify issues before the doctors even can see it. Let's say mammogram, right? The AI can detect certain cancerous cells a year before the doctor can or radiologist can. But then the issue becomes is if you know it well in advance, it might or might not become cancer, but the patient will be worrying about it, which is a different can of worms.
My listeners love to learn about trends in the space. They also love to learn what drives women leaders in healthcare innovation. What are things that you do in your personal life that help you work your best and make a difference as a CEO?
I don't think I'm the right person to give advice to anybody. I wish I had more time.
Most leaders say that. Most leaders say that. If you could give yourself a piece of advice on how to improve how you approach leadership and how you approach, managing your life, what would you tell yourself?
Well, it's more not people always ask whether if I have a magic wand, what would I like to ask for? I would say time. That's my biggest issue.
Yes. And as a leader, I'm sure you have had obstacles come your way. What are some strategies you've put into place to stay resilient?
I have a very strong support network. You can't do it alone. And professional or personal, but strong network, strong support network.
Absolutely. And if you could give your younger self a piece of advice, what would you tell her?
Rely more on relationships.
So to finish this conversation off right, where can our listeners find you online?
Well, I'm easy to find based on my last name, right? But I'm on LinkedIn, so please feel free to connect with me and let's have a chat. My company's website is called glender.com. But for me personally, you can find me on LinkedIn.
Perfect. Now, before I forget, did you happen to bring tea or coffee with you? And if so, what is your favorite mug to typically drink coffee or tea in?
The largest possible. And I like black tea. It's actually stronger than coffee. So.
Oh, I love it. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. It was great to learn from you.
Thank you. And thank you for having me on this podcast.
And thanks to you folks for joining us too. Check out the HITea With Grace podcast for more interviews with great guests like Julia today. Cheers.
Like a Girl Media is more than a media network. It's a community. We want to meet you and amplify your voice and the voices of outstanding women innovating in healthcare. Interested in starting your own podcast or hosting an event near you? Connect with us online or in person. We're here to support and empower you.